Every year thousands of Christians amble down to the local county courthouse and obtain a marriage license from the state in order to marry the future spouse. They do this unquestioningly. They do it because the pastor has told them to go get one, and besides, everybody else gets one. This pamphlet attempts to answer the question, why should we not get one? 1. The definition of a license demands that we not obtain one to marry. Black's Law Dictionary defines license as the permission by competent authority to do an act which without such permission would be illegal. We need to ask ourselves, why should it be illegal to marry without the state's permission? More importantly, why should we need the state's permission to participate in something which God instituted? Gen. 2:18-24. We should not need the state's permission to marry, nor should we grovel before state officials to seek it. What if you apply and the state says no? You must understand that the authority to license implies the power to prohibit. A license by definition confers a right to do something. The state cannot grant the right to marry. It is a God-given right. And remember separation of church and state. What we are reading is a contradiction, or is it just a phrase? 2. By obtaining a marriage license, you place yourself under the jurisdiction of family court, which is governed by unbiblical and immoral laws. Under these laws, you can divorce for any reason. Often, the courts side with the spouse who is in rebellion to God, and castigates the spouse who remains faithful by ordering him or her not to speak about the Bible or other matters of faith when present with the children. As an elder, I no longer perform a marriage which would place people under this immoral body of laws. I also cannot marry someone with a marriage license, because to do so I have to act as an agent of the state. I would have to sign the marriage license, and I would have to mail it into the state. Given the state's demand to usurp the place of God and family regarding marriage, and given it is unbiblical, immoral laws to govern marriage, it would be an act of treason for me to do so. Separation of church and state in the United States. Separation of church and state is a phrase used by Thomas Jefferson and others expressing an understanding of the intent and function of the Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. That is, which reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The intent of this clause was to limit the power of the federal government in regard to religion, thus ensuring freedom of religion in the United States of America. The phrase, separation of church and state, is generally traced to a January 1, 1802 letter by Thomas Jefferson, addressed to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut, and published in a Massachusetts newspaper. Jefferson wrote, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that the legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. 1. Jefferson was echoing the language of the founder of the First Baptist Church in America, Roger Williams, who had written in 1644 of a hedge, a wall of separation between the garden of the church and the wilderness of the world. Article 6 of the United States Constitution also specifies that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Jefferson's metaphor of a wall of separation has been cited repeatedly by the U.S. Supreme Court. In Reynolds v. United States, 1879, the court wrote that Jefferson's comments may be accepted almost as an authoritative declaration of the scope and effect of the First Amendment. In Everson v. Board of Education, 1947, Justice Hugo Black wrote, in the words of Thomas Jefferson, the clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect a wall of separation between church and state. 2. However, the court has not always interpreted the constitutional principle as absolute, and the proper extent of separation between government and religion in the U.S. remains an ongoing subject of impassioned debate. The phrase, separation of church and state, was initially coined by Baptists striving for religious toleration in Virginia, whose official state religion was then Anglican Episcopalian. Baptists thought government limitations against religion illegitimate. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson championed the cause. The preamble in Act establishing religious freedom in Virginia, 1786, affirms that the author of our religion gave us our free will. and that he chose not to propagate it by coercions. This legislation certainly did not diminish religious influence on government, for it also provided stiff penalties for conducting business on the Sabbath. The marriage license invades the jurisdiction of family government. When you read the Bible, you see that God intended for children to have the father's blessing regarding whom they married. Daughters were to be given in marriage by the fathers. DT 22:16 X 22:17. We have a vestige of this in our culture today, in that the father takes his daughter to the front of the altar and the minister asks, "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" Historically, in early America, when you read the laws of the colonies and the states, you see almost all required permission of the parents for young people to marry. Back then you saw godly government displayed in that the state recognized the parents' authority by demanding that the parents' permission be obtained. Today, the all-encompassing ungodly state demands that the permission be obtained to marry. By issuing marriage licenses, the state is saying, you don't need your parents' permission, you need our permission. If parents are opposed to the child's marrying a certain person and refuse to give the permission, the child can do an end run around the parents' authority by obtaining the state's permission, and marry anyway. This is an invasion and attack upon family government by the state. 4. When you marry with a marriage license, you are like a polygamist. From the state's point of view, when you marry with a marriage license, you are not just marrying your spouse, but you are also marrying the state. The most blatant declaration of this fact that I have ever found is a brochure entitled "With This Ring I Thee Wed." It is found in county courthouses across Ohio where people go to obtain the marriage licenses. It is published by the Ohio State Bar Association. The opening paragraph under the subtitle, Marriage Vows, states, actually, when you repeat your marriage vows you enter into a legal contract. There are 3 parties to that contract. 1. You. 2. Your husband or wife, as the case may be, and 3. The state of Ohio. See, the state and the lawyers know that when you marry with a marriage license, you are not just marrying your spouse, you are marrying the state. You are like a polygamist. You are not just making a vow to your spouse, but you are making a vow to the state and your spouse. You are also giving undue jurisdiction to the state. Now we're going to talk about the finger rings. Finger rings in pagan history. The story of the finger ring is in a way like the ring itself, without beginning and without end. No one can tell for certain how far back the ring goes. Finger rings appear to have originated with the ancient Egyptians, evolving from the seal or signet. Because the seal was a sign of power, the wearer of a portable seal, a signet ring, was regarded as a person of great authority. A royal personage wishing to delegate his power to one of his officials would hand him his signet ring. This would enable the subordinate to issue commands with full royal authority. We find a good example of this practice in Genesis 41:42. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. The transformation of the signet ring into an ornament appears to have occurred also in Egypt. Wealthy Egyptian women wore gold rings on different fingers. The poorer classes wore rings of less costly materials, such as silver, bronze, glass, or pottery covered with a silicious glaze and colored blue, green with various copper oxides. Point 2. Greeks, Etruscans, and Romans refined the art of making ornamental rings. Throughout the period of the Roman Republic, 449–31 BC, however, only iron finger rings were worn by most of the citizens. Slaves were forbidden to wear rings on the fingers. This policy of austerity came to an end at the beginning of the imperial period, about 31 BC. Gold finger rings appeared, but the right to wear them was restricted to ambassadors, then extended to senators, consuls, and chief officers of state. Different laws were passed during imperial Rome to govern the wearing of finger rings. Pliny informs us that Emperor Tiberius required that those who were not of free descent be owners of large property before having the right to wear gold finger rings. 3. Emperor Severus extended the right to wear gold finger rings sui nuliore first to Roman soldiers and then to all free citizens. Silver finger rings were worn by freedmen, that is, slaves who had become free. Iron finger rings were worn by slaves. Under Emperor Justinian these restrictions were abolished. It is interesting to note that during Imperial Rome gold, silver, and iron finger rings were worn in accordance with the social class to which one belonged. The finger ring, so to speak, tied a person down to his or her social class. You never wonder why the church called it the pulpit. The real translation is fool's pit. The key word is pit. Why would you call it a pit for someone to fall into? I know some people really are not paying attention to what I am presenting. I know some of y'all have the attention span of a short comma. I get it, and I know at this very moment some people are saying to themselves and to the friends.
What you talking about? 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 What you talking about?